Philosophically, what does Superman represent to people?
A friend, and that's what people really need most. They don't need a strong arm, one man vigilante force. They need a friend. We're living in an age when people are basically afraid of contact with each other. They're afraid. People live in cities. They don't even know their neighbors. They're afraid to go out in the street. Something might happen to them. Basically, technology is against you. Life is overwhelming. Even the bank doesn't know who you are. And it's like, we run around scared a lot, particularly those of us who live in cities.
Superman is a character who's good.
Who is filled with hope. He saves people because it's the right thing to do. We could use a little bit more of that.
Yeah, good. Okay, good. Good work.
How's Superman to work with?
He's fun.
Nice work, everybody.
Ever since the character's creation in 1938, Superman has by far become the most iconic and the most successful superhero to really ever do it. And whether you're someone like myself that is super obsessed with superheroes, or someone like my grandma that knows literally nothing about them, you know who Superman is. When you see the S on his chest, you know what he stands for and what he's about. And if that's the case, then you would think, specifically in today's media landscape, that Superman would have some of the most popular and iconic and successful superhero movies of all time, right? Well, not necessarily. See, Superman has a very lengthy history when it comes to his movies on the big screen, and I'm not going to dive into the legal ins and outs of everything, but I figured with Superman coming out literally this month, kicking off the brand new DC universe, that it makes sense for my hyper-obsessive self to watch every single live-action Superman movie that's really ever existed, starting with his black and white days, going all the way to the most recent Superman movie of Batman vs. Superman. So if that's something you're interested in, then stick around, because I have a lot to say, and I had a whole lot of fun making this video. So kicking it off, we have the wildly successful, the very iconic, the Superman movie that started it off and created a legacy on the big screen. I have Superman the movie. No, that's not right. I have Superman and the Mole Men, that's right. Superman and the Mole Men, coming out in 1951, is technically the very first live-action Superman movie. And I'm just gonna be honest, this movie is not really anything. It deals with Clark Kent and Lois Lane going to this small town in the middle of nowhere to write a report in an article based on this oil company. And what ends up happening is the oil company actually uncovers these two mole men that are 6 miles deep into the earth. And I kid you not, the whole plot of this movie is that the townsmen are racist and want to kill these two mole men, who are actually just children with bald caps on. They want to kill these mole men because they look different than them. If that doesn't sound like anything that's currently going on in society, then I don't know what else will. But the whole plot of this movie is the townsmen evil, and that these mole men just want to survive and live and habitate with themselves. And as far as Superman, there's really only one scene, and Superman goes to the townsmen and it's hey, knock it off. You got to do better, Senator.
You've got to do better, Senator.
And that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot of Supermaning going on in this movie, but it's technically the first ever live-action Superman movie. This movie really just reminds me of an old-timey cowboy western that my grandpa would have on when I'd go over to his house for Thanksgiving or Christmas. There's really nothing special about this, and genuinely, I cannot rank this in good conscience compared to the rest of the movies on this list. So I'm going to go ahead and give Superman the Mole Men a very important gold star with a thumbs up that says good job. Finally, getting into the real Superman movie that started this list with Superman the movie with Christopher Reeves, I've got a lot to say, because growing up, I watched on this Blu-ray DVD, shout out Aunt Amy, all of the Superman movies as a little kid. I actually do have pretty fond memories of watching them on television with my dad, and as far as Superman media goes, Superman with Christopher Reeves, that is the definitive Superman movie. So when my wife and I sat down, we were beyond excited to start this marathon, only for Superman, the movie that I thought would kick off Superman on the big screen, to start with a 45-minute intro scene of Superman's parents on Krypton. The movie literally starts with a backstory on Krypton, which is totally fine, but it takes 45 minutes, and then Superman himself, adult Clark Kent, doesn't show up until an hour and 7 minutes into the movie. That just obviously hindsight is 2020, and I'm going to say this before I get into it with all the other movies on this. I'm not claiming to know more than what the producers and the writing team and everyone knew back when these movies first came out, right? Obviously, hindsight is 2020. But being in modern day and seeing how bad these movies were kind of structured, It just makes no sense. It's so mind-boggling. Enough about that. Let's just get into the plot of what actually happens in this movie. Once we finally get back to Metropolis, the plot of this movie really revolves around Lois writing an article over Superman and Lex Luthor being a landlord. Lex Luthor's plan is literally just to nuke San Andreas on the fault line, sending half of California flying into the ocean so that his rental properties that are on the east side of California that aren't affected by the fault line falling into the ocean will then see a boom of renters so then he can make more money.
All I wanted was to fire a missile into a fault line to sink half a quahog into the ocean and make my real estate waterfront.
You got that from Superman.
Lex Luthor is a landlord. And when you're in the 80s, how can we write an evil villain? Let's just make him an evil landlord. Now, I know it sounds like I'm riffing on this movie and being negative right out the gate, but there are some parts in this movie that genuinely blew me away and I was a huge fan of. Superman and Lois. The chemistry between Superman and Lois and Clark Kent is genuinely unmatched. Watching them on screen interact felt like something out of a fever dream, but in the nicest way possible. It's like it was ripped directly from a comic book. Superman saving people and being a friend is genuinely so peak. Superman is a friend to everyone, and he literally says that. Superman, when he was asked by Lois, "Who are you?" he says, "A friend."
Who are you?
A friend.
This is the version of Superman that the media in today's modern landscape has completely gotten wrong. Superman is a friend to all, and it's so obvious from the beginning of this movie that the people behind this team in this movie get Superman, and it's so refreshing to see. Another huge plus is that the actress for Lois Lane absolutely steals the show. Lois Lane is like the most important character in almost any Superman story, and in this movie, and specifically the next one, she steals the show. She is the center of attention, and it's so refreshing in superhero movies to have the woman or girlfriend be a main character that can stand on her own and isn't just a damsel in distress like Mary Jane. I could talk for hours about the costume design in this movie, whether it be on Krypton with Clark's parents and this crazy LED reflective costuming, or just overall Superman and Lois's costuming. The costume design absolutely crushed it in this movie, and almost every single outfit is extremely iconic and memorable for the specific character that it's about. And when that's matched with memorable sets and atmospheres, this movie makes you feel at home. This movie has a very homey vibe to it that I can really only compare to the early Star Wars movies, where when you saw practical effects, you could tell that they were like on paintings or they were smaller crafts, but at the same time, it didn't take you out of the movie. This movie's atmosphere is 1 in a million, and maybe it's just because that's how things were done back in the 80s for old sci-fi and fantasy movies, but there's something about this movie's atmosphere that I quite can't put my tongue on, but it just makes me feel safe and warm and fuzzy and makes me feel at home, and I absolutely adore it. And it's seen all throughout all 4 of these movies, but in my opinion, it's noticeable the most when Superman and Lois meet for the very first time, and Lois writes her article, "I Spent a Night with Superman." That scene, whether it be from the sound design, the dialogue, the will they won't they banter, makes me feel right at home and like I belong in this universe with these characters that I've never even seen before. Now, enough glazing about this movie, because there's a lot that I did not like, even though the high highs in this movie are very high, but the low lows, they do get pretty low, unfortunately. Like I said earlier, we spend 45 minutes on Krypton for absolutely no reason at the beginning of the movie. A lot of Superman's powers are inconsistent. There's sometimes where he has telekinesis, or he can read people's minds, or just do things that Superman in other iterations of the character just doesn't do. And I'm not faulting the movie for that, but it's definitely something that I think they did just to like make Superman as powerful as possible, instead of trying to stick to the source material as closely as they could. This movie also suffers from not having some of the best pacing. This movie plays around with Superman and Lois for the second act of the movie, and then right when we introduce Lex Luthor at the end, that's when he becomes a villain and all the bad stuff happens. There's not a whole lot of seeding of Lex Luthor at the beginning of the movie, so when he finally shows up, it's time to be evil, and it feels like tonal whiplash. The best parts of this movie genuinely are the second act of Superman and Lois interacting in a will they won't they banter, and then once Lex shows up and introduces his plan for the movie, I think it just falls apart in my opinion. Like the final battle, for instance, just makes no sense. Superman ends up reversing time for a woman that he met like 2 weeks ago, not talking about all the implications of what could happen when you reverse time or Flashpoint or anything like that. And yeah, maybe I'm just being a total nerd and I'm reading into this too much, but Superman reversing time for this woman that, like, the first woman ever to really give him attention kind of seems out of character in my opinion. But staying consistent in the continuity, it's like in The Phantom Menace and Star Wars where Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan use like the Force Dash for the first time, and then it's just never talked about in the entire universe ever again. That's exactly what happens at the end of this movie when Superman reverses time by flying around the Earth super fast. It's so stupid. In my opinion, it's also very clear to me that the overall aesthetic and choice to spend 45 minutes on Krypton at the beginning of the movie is trying to capitalize off the success of Star Wars: A New Hope, being a new sci-fi fantasy adventure-esque movie that just came out and absolutely crushed it. In my opinion, Superman really doesn't have that same charm that A New Hope does when it comes to the feeling of the universe and how successful Star Wars and the sci-fi world building is. I feel like the same aesthetic is there, but it's obviously executed better in Star Wars. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie. The high highs are really high, and the low lows, they really stink. Like, in the final battle, Superman flies into the Earth, picks up the fault lines, and molds them back together to save the San Andreas fault line after he already reverses time. Like, there's just a lot of stuff in this movie that are stupid. He gets sexually assaulted, and all this stuff that just, like, doesn't really fit for me, at least. So I have to give this movie no higher than a 7 out of 10, and that's if you start the movie at 45 minutes in. If you skip over all the Krypton stuff and start directly when he's in Metropolis, I give it a 7 out of 10. But if you start all the way from the beginning, I give this movie a 4 out of 10. And before you guys come for my throat, because I know this is like an iconic cultish like movie, I'm going to put on screen like my rating system for movies. 7 out of 10, that's a good movie. I just don't think it's a great movie. And a 4 out of 10, I think it's fine, but it's really bogged down from the beginning of the movie. So if you cut that part out, I give it a very solid 7 out of 10. Time for Superman 2. This movie picks up the pace and definitely raises the stakes compared to the previous movie. Overall, the plot of this movie involves an on and off again between Lois and Clark as she guesses and tries to figure out if Clark is Superman. And at the same time, General Zod and his 2 goons escape the Phantom Zone, coming to Earth and trying to control the Earth. Superman then has to, take down General Zod and his goons, while Superman decides if he wants to reveal his secret identity to Lois. Superman 2 has a lot more pros than I originally thought going back and rewatching it, but the dynamic between Clark and Lois for the first half of this movie is so campy and charming, I absolutely love it. Their character dynamic is brilliantly written and executed. The superhero secret identity drama of trying to reveal or deciding if they should or not, that is always a great storytelling device in my opinion, and it's seen almost perfectly in Superman 2 and Spider-Man 2. Choosing to have Superman face off against villains of his own stature and strength was honestly such a breath of fresh air compared to the first movie, where Superman, the main final battle was him just reversing time, whereas in this movie he is getting beat and destroyed by Zod and his goons, so it's finally good to see Superman using his strength for more than just lifting up a random helicopter. This movie also decides to bring back Lex Luthor, and it's a brilliant decision in my opinion, having him team up with General Zod. He's so brilliantly evil and conniving that when he backstabs everyone along the way, it's so consistent with his character that no one bats an eye, not even Superman. This movie does a great job of showcasing genuinely how evil General Zod and his goons are. They land on the moon at the beginning of the movie, kill the NASA agents that are on there, fly down to Earth, and the first thing they decide is you know what, we have powers now. Let's just take over the world. This movie, to its praise, has a cohesive plotline and is written so much better than the first movie. It seems like the writers were actually given more time to cook and flesh out both A and B plotlines, having them merge together at the end. I really like this movie. There's a lot that this movie does right, but there's also a good chunk that this movie doesn't do well, so let's just get into some of my negatives that I have for the movie. Like I said with Superman 1, Superman and Zod in this movie are genuinely so incredibly inconsistent with their powers. It's like they're gods that have been written for no specific reason and have their powers form for whatever the current situation calls for. I mean, there is a scene, it's been memed to death, but Superman, Zod is flying at Superman. Superman throws the S on his chest. He just rips it off and throws it like a frisbee at Zod, and it wraps around him Mr. Fantastic style.
So, listen, Cleveland, the reason I asked you out here, I've been wanting to talk to you about something. In Superman 2, what is the story with that cellophane S that Superman rips off his chest and throws at the bad guy?
Prepare to be destroyed, Superman. What was that? Yeah, take that, you jerk.
I'm not the biggest Superman fan out there, so I haven't read all of his media, but when has he ever done that before? That might be me nitpicking, but what is not nitpicking is when Superman decides to get rid of his powers so he can just live a normal life with Lois. She doesn't ask him to do this. She just realizes that, oh my gosh, Clark Kent and Superman are the same people. Then Clark takes her to the Fortress of Solitude, and he gets in this chamber and just drains his powers so he can just be a normal person with Lois. And genuinely, Lois doesn't like him after that. It's so obvious that she only like has the hots and is horny for actual Superman. And that's something I'll get to later down the road. Lois Lane is like so incredibly like having the hots for Superman in this, and it is wild. She wants nothing to do with Clark Kent. Even when she finds out that they're like the same character, she wants nothing to do with Clark, but wants everything to do with Superman. It's so mind-boggling and weird. I feel like Superman giving up his powers was also only added to pad for runtime because it goes nowhere in the movie, and then he gets his powers back at the very end of the movie. Clark then, after defeating the villains, basically breaks up with Lois like a No Way Home style, and I think he like brainwashes her or something, or like reverses her memories. It wasn't really clear to me what happened, but after they like kiss and make up and everything, he just says like, oh, I can't be Superman anymore. You can't know that I'm Superman. And then he just like wipes her memory of her knowing that he was ever Superman, which makes no sense at all. Some good standouts to me in this movie are like in the first one with Lex Luthor. General Zod in this movie is so cartoonishly evil. It's so funny to watch on screen with how he has no regard to human life. Overall, though, this movie was definitely more cohesive and coherent compared to the first one. This movie was given more time to cook, and it's obviously shown in the movie. The visuals are very limited to being in 1981, but this is a great movie for the time, and it seems to actually understand the character of Superman. My favorite part of this movie had to deal with Clark and Lois, and that's the best part of the movie. Of the will they, won't they, of them bantering and just spending time together. The gags and the dry humor in this movie are genuinely funny, and I laughed out loud multiple times. Lex Luthor, as always, is so cartoonishly evil in these movies and is hilarious. I'm giving this a very, very solid 7.5 out of 10. It's better than the first one, but it doesn't do anything crazy. Oh boy, we've got Superman 3. This is when the Superman movies, like if they're starting to go up, it just takes a straight nosedive. Superman 3 is terrible. And I've always wondered on this DVD, this Blu-ray that I got, it's got Superman 1, 2, and then Superman like Returns. I was like, where is 3 and 4? Now I know why. Superman 3 and 4 are abysmal. Do not watch them. They're terrible. Very quickly, I'll break down the plot of this movie because I do not encourage you to watch this movie. The story revolves around Superman and this random guy named Gus. At the beginning of the movie, Gus is looking for work and is at an unemployment facility when he overhears someone talking about a job in like computers. Apparently, Gus is like the Elon Musk or the Bill Gates when it comes to computers. He just is a computer whiz for no reason. This unemployed guy knows everything there is to know about computers. And so he gets hired at this like consulting agency and basically is just killing the game. And when he gets his first paycheck, he realizes that he's getting deductions from like taxes and Social Security. And he literally says like, I want my money now. I don't want to pay for the future. I need my money now.
State tax, federal tax, Social Security tax.
All right, so you're still getting some money when you hit 65.
So I'm getting money when I hit 65. I want mine now.
And because he's so brilliant, he actually figures out a way to hack into the system and defraud the company and the IRS. He wants his money now, so he genuinely just writes a new code and is able to steal $89,000 from the owners of this company called the Websters, who are actually like the main big bad in this movie. This, of course, as you would guess, gets the attention of the owners of the company, and the Websters bring him up to the top of the building, and long story short, they say, Gus, even though you just stole $89,000 from us, you're a genius. We want you to work with us. And the whole Webster's plan is that they're trying to become like an oil tycoon or something and make a whole lot of money. But of course, Superman being Superman is going to get in the way of them defrauding the world of oil or whatever. So they tell Gus, hey, we're going to build a supercomputer. We want you to run it, and we want this supercomputer to just kill Superman. It's so stupid. Long story short, though, Superman fights Gus at the end of the movie in this artificial intelligence computer thing that Gus created. It's the most boring final battle. I would watch Thor: The Dark World 1,000 times before watching this again. It is awful. I genuinely, I don't really fall asleep while watching movies, even if they're stupid. I like to watch bad horror movies and stuff. I almost fell asleep during this. It's so dull and boring, and I'm not exaggerating. And then, as you would guess, at the end of the day, Superman defeats the evil robot computer thing. But the most bizarre part of this movie isn't how bad the writing is and how terrible that the actors are in this. Gus absolutely kills it. Gus is the only good part of this movie. But the craziest part is after genuinely the electric romance and Will They Won't They in Superman 1 and 2, Lois and Clark do not interact the entire movie. They are separated. Clark is sent to Smallville. Lois is doing who knows what. She's just not in the movie. And that's just so weird to me because they are the best parts of Superman 1 and 2. And then I don't know if there was behind the scenes drama or whatever. I don't care enough to look into it, but just Lois was gone, which I thought was just an overall terrible decision. Going over the pros for this movie, like I said, the literal only pro that I found from watching this movie is that Gus is genuinely funny. Gus was cracking me up in this movie. The actor is doing such a good job, and he is so campy. There were multiple parts in this movie where, because of his comedic timing for line delivery, I genuinely chuckled and laughed out loud. Hey, editing Cody here. Apparently, after talking to my dad about this movie, Richard Pryor, the actor that plays Gus, is a very well-known comedian, so call me new gen, but I had no idea he was a comedian, so it makes sense that he is hilarious in this movie. Besides that, this movie sucks. This movie is terrible. There's an evil, Bizarro-esque Superman plotline where he gets his, soul separated from his body, but then that soul gets his own body, and he's a Bizarro. That was purely padded for runtime. The resetting of Lois and Clark not knowing if he's Superman, I don't know if it was a different writing team or whatever, but it was just awful. There's a lot of this movie that, I wouldn't necessarily say is bad. It's just so boring and stupid. There's nothing of value in this movie, if that makes sense. It just seems like the studio wanted to do a Brainiac-esque story, but couldn't get the rights to do it and didn't know how audience would feel about a super artificial intelligence alien. I love the scenes of Gus in this movie. He is very goofy, but the vibe of this movie just does not fit and does not work for a Superman movie. I don't know how you go from the extremely high highs of Superman 2 with Lois and Clark interacting, being the heart and soul of the franchise, and then choosing to separate Lois and Clark the entire movie in Superman 3. Lois Lane is barely in this movie, and sending Superman off to Smallville by himself, I feel like it could be interesting and it could work, but sadly it doesn't. You could have a will they won't they, or Superman's I want to be with you, Lois, but I've got dragged to Smallville. You can make that dynamic work with creative writing choices. That's not in this movie at all. The only fun parts of this movie is Gus and watching how bad this movie is when it comes to storytelling and fight scenes. The framework of this movie is so bad, the movie doesn't know if it wants to be a Brainiac story or a Bizarro story or a story about Superman helping the little guy that's very clearly getting abused and manipulated by the oligarchs and the system. This movie is just all over the place and doesn't know what it wants to be, and it's so painfully obvious that there was no clear direction on where the story wanted to go. I feel like the best analogy for this movie is the Star Wars sequels. The Force Awakens had a clear point for where it wanted to go. The Last Jedi kind of disrupted all that, and then J.J. Abrams came back in and retconned everything. This whole movie feels like there's just no one on the same writing team throwing different plot points into this walk and seeing what sticks to the pan and what works. And unfortunately, that leaves the movie with nothing working for it. So I'm going to give Superman 3 a very fitting 3 out of 10.
The only way for me to solve this crisis is to be Superman 4, The Quest for Peace.
Oh, that's why they call it that.
Moving on to Superman 4, or Superman the Quest for Peace. The plot for this, in my opinion, is almost as bad as Superman 3. Because of how unsuccessful Superman 3 was, I think they decided for Superman the Quest for Peace to bring back the only repeating villain in the entire franchise, that, of course, being Lex Luthor. Lex has this random nephew at the beginning of the movie that breaks him and Otis out of jail, and then just decides he needs to kill Superman. Lex literally just decides, well, thank you, nephew, for breaking me out of jail. Let's go kill Superman. That's the one thing I love about this franchise, is that Lex is so consistent on how, he just wants to make money and wants to kill Superman. The main plot of this movie revolves around Lex Luthor trying to get some DNA from Superman to create another super being to mimic Superman's power so he can control that being to kill Superman. Think of Sentry from the Thunderbolts, where Valentina is trying to just control Sentry to do her bidding. Lex just wants to take this guy whose name is, I think, Nuclear Man, and just control him and tell him to kill Superman because Lex has has no powers and can't do it himself. Instead of doing what they do in the comics and giving Lex like a mech suit, they're just like, hey, let's just spawn in and create this guy out of nuclear energy and have him kill Superman instead. The subplot involves the Daily Planet getting new owners, and the daughter of the Daily Planet's new owner, she has a crush on Clark Kent, which for some reason makes Lois jealous, even though they're not a thing. Well, at least I'm pretty sure they're not a thing. The storytelling between Lois and Clark after Superman 2 is just so inconsistent. But this movie, like, I don't know if it was trying to be what Superman Returns is, as being like a reboot or whatever, but Superman 4, the plot is the exact same as Superman 1. Lex wants to kill Superman so he can become rich off of his real estate tycoon. That's it. And so he has this nuclear man do his bidding for him. It's just so stupid. Pros for this movie are that it's only an hour and a half. Superman actually fights a person this time instead of a computer, so that's a plus. But besides those two, the only other thing I can give this movie praise for is just being laughably bad when it comes to the action set pieces. In the final battle, Superman fights Nuclear Man for like 10 minutes of them just exchanging punches with no dialogue, and the only time you see them like interacting is when they're like chasing and flying across screen. It's so funny, and like, I don't want to say old-timey because there's things like Star Wars that came out in this exact same time, or like Terminator, where they're using the resources that they had at the time and they're absolutely crushing it. I don't give this movie that pass at all. Also, at the very beginning of the movie, I didn't really know where to fit this in, but Superman goes to like a Senate hearing, because the whole undertone through all four of these movies are that it's like trying to teach a lesson, like bring back movies that have themes and are trying to convey a lesson to the audience. But the one for this movie is that nuclear energy is bad. And I think this was at the time with propaganda where nuclear energy was looked at as the same type of nuclear as like the atomic bomb or the H-bomb. Because Superman flies to like a Senate hearing or whatever and literally says in front of the whole world, maybe it's like the United Nations, like, I vow to stop nuclear arms. And if that was the real world, the CIA would put a kryptonite bullet in his chest or in his head, or he would die from the like, make it look like he has a heart attack gun. But what ends up happening is Superman flies around the world, picking up all of the nukes in the entire world, putting it in, it's like something out of Family Guy, putting all of the nukes into this like fish net, spinning it around his head and throwing it into the sun. Who cares about what would happen if you threw 100 nukes into the sun? Like, this movie is just so goofy, I can't take it serious. I feel like this movie was only a cash grab because the extremely long fight scenes don't make any sense for me. In this movie, there's no world building, there's no implications of cause and effects in this universe because, like I said earlier, Superman throws nukes into the sun. I don't think there's any reason for this movie to revolve and have a new girl or a new love interest in this subplot other than adding more runtime in this movie. The theme for this, like I said, is that nuclear energy is bad. Going back to Superman 3 really quickly, because all four of these movies have themes, whether you like it or not. Superman 3's theme is that big computers and big tech can't be trusted. It's literally like pushed in your face so much. Be afraid of supercomputers and be afraid of nuclear energy. It's so stupid. Bring back movies being propaganda machines. Let's just throw out all the propaganda into our superhero movies. Overall, this movie, it's not as bad as Superman 3, but this in no universe compares to the highs of Superman 1 and 2. I wouldn't recommend watching this movie if you were on a plane or you were even putting it on in the background while doing chores around the house. This movie was 1000% just a cash grab to go off of the IP and make more money, and it's painfully obvious to me at least that there being no Superman 5 or 6, that this movie, especially only being an hour and a half, was just made to make money. This movie could have been a solid hour and it would have been a good like mini-series movie or something, but the story was not needed to be told. There's no reason this movie should have come out. That being said, it's not as bad as Superman 3, so I'm going to give this Superman 4 a 3.5 out of 10. Moving on to one of my favorite movies in this entire list, I have Superman Returns. The plot for this movie is that Superman Returns is a like reboot / retcon continuation of the Superman Christopher Reeves 4 movies. It's kind of a soft reboot, but it's also heavily implied that this is the same version of Superman. He's just been gone for a long time. This story revolves around Clark when he comes back to Metropolis for the first time in like 5 years or so, and it reintroduces all of the original characters with new actors and new fresh takes on the universe. Lex Luthor gets broken out of jail, or he does his big bad stuff like he always does, and decides again immediately, I need to kill Superman. Like, that's the one thing that's so consistent in all of these movies is Lex Luthor, his only goal is I need to kill Superman because I'm racist towards aliens. He's also wanting to be a real estate tycoon, exactly like the very first Superman movie, and Lex's plan is to take those like kryptonite crystals and throw them into the ocean because apparently they like react very well with water and create a huge landmass. So he goes to the Fortress of Solitude, steals all these crystals, throws it into the ocean so it will create a new continent that he'll be the owner of and then can charge people to live on his island. It's just so goofy. As you could guess, Superman foils his plan, and then Superman also, for some reason, is a baby daddy, and then at the end of the movie is an absent father. Him and Lois Lane had a super child, so there's like Superboy in this universe, but Jimmy Marsden is the boy's father, and he wants nothing to do with Superman, so instead of Superman like sitting him down and saying, yeah, this is my son actually, like tough luck, he's just an absent father and leaves, and there's no Superman Returns 2, so I guess Superman's an absent father for the rest of this universe. This movie did have some pretty high highs, though, like the other Superman movies. I really enjoyed this take on Superman. It was definitely a reboot and a continuation of the original movies, and I think that Brandon Routh, in my opinion at least, is a great choice to be the continuation of Christopher Reeves. All of the casting in this entire movie did a great job. Whoever the casting director was needs a raise, because Gene Hackman's version of Lex Luthor being Kevin Spacey and Brandon Routh's being Christopher Reeves' version of Superman, they look like the exact same. I don't know how they did it. Like, that is such great casting. My wife the entire time kept saying how hot James Marsden is and that he should have been Superman. And the more I think about it, like with Nicholas Hoult and David Cornsweet in the new Superman movie, I bet James Marsden auditioned to be Superman and then just didn't get it. So they made him this just random figure who's like a parent to Superman's kid. I don't know. He had like no character, but I really, really like the casting choice for everyone in this entire movie. Another thing that I loved about this movie is the suit design, because it's the same suit as Christopher Reeves, but you can tell that it's like a modern 2000s twist where the colors aren't as vibrant. The red is a maroon, the blue is almost a navy, and it's made to fit in the same universe as The Dark Knight, but for some reason, I think it works. I know I had mentioned in Superman 3 that I don't like that Superman and Lois got separated, but in this movie, it's implied that Superman has been gone for 5 years, and that the split between Lois and Superman actually is a very unique decision that I think works really well in this movie. It shows that Lois is her own independent character and that she doesn't need to rely on Superman to stand on her own and write articles about. She's very successful on her own with or without Superman. I don't know if this is a pro or con necessarily, but I think it's really funny that Lex Luthor's character motivations are the exact same from Superman 1, except he just wants to make more money and kill Superman in a more brutal way this time. The score, the sound effects, the action pieces in this movie are all so brilliantly done in my opinion. It's such a breath of fresh air compared to the two previous Superman movies. Like, yeah, I know this could be said, and it's due to the time with how the effects are in the early 2000s, but genuinely, I think choosing to do a showcase of Superman's powers in very unique action set pieces in this movie is really effective to show who Superman is and that he's a powerful version of Superman, and that it's the same version, but it's a different version as well from the Christopher Reeves movie. I don't know how to say this without just comparing it to the comics, but this version of Superman feels like Superman. In the first two Superman movies, Christopher Reeves does a phenomenal job, but in the last two, I feel like you really lose the heart and soul of who Superman is. Brandon Routh, in my opinion, encompasses what Superman is supposed to look like and feel like. You can tell that he has the heart for the little guy and he just wants to do the right thing, which later on is unfortunately something that the later iterations of Superman on this list did not represent. But Brandon Routh has such like a warm charm to his character that I feel like his version of Superman is ripped out of the comic books. This version of Superman is the type of guy that would sit on the edge of a rooftop with you and just talk to you while you're contemplating whether you should jump or not. This Superman actually cares for the little guy and isn't a stoic, brooding force of nature that feels like a demigod or something. This feels like Superman. This feels like Clark Kent. And I think that's the best compliment I could give any version of Superman. Now, don't get me wrong, this movie is not perfect. The worst thing about this movie is that it's dogged down to, unfortunately, being tied to the Christopher Reeves movies. I don't know why the studio just didn't do a complete reboot like the Man of Steel did, but the worst thing about this movie is that it has to stay in the same continuity as the previous four. Lex Luthor's plan also doesn't make a whole lot of sense, like I said earlier. The world governments are not just going to allow this freak to create his own continent and be the owner of it. Like, that's just not how geopolitics work. If it's not just the exact same plot from the first movie, but with a twist, I don't know what this movie was supposed to be. Choosing to have Superman be a father, but not be a parent, is also a very unique decision. Like, I might be ignorant to the version of comic book stories where Superboy is introduced, but from what I've seen with the animated movies, that's not what Superman's like at all. I said it before, but I'll say it one more time. The worst thing that this movie did is being connected to the Christopher Reeves movies. I don't know why this movie didn't get enough credit to where it's due, because this isn't rated that highly when I looked on Letterboxd or Rotten Tomatoes, and I feel like it never quite found its footing to stand on its own as an independent Superman. I think if this movie was marketed as like what The Man of Steel was, like this is just a new Superman movie, instead of this is the same continuity from 40 years ago or 20 years ago, I think it would have done a lot better. But being tied down due to it being the same version of Superman, I feel like did more harm than good for this Superman story. Also, the third act of this movie was pretty awful. Like, I get why this movie got bad reviews. It's drawn out for so long, and I did find myself getting bored after a while. Overall, I found this movie to be very entertaining, and it's very good at what it was trying to do. When I see that the story is consistently reminding you that this is the same version of Superman, I mean it, and it gets annoying by doing, like, the Marvel, oh, do you get this reference? And then, like, looking at the camera, being like, wink, wink, this is the same character, but it's different. Like, I don't know. I found it to be repetitive and a little annoying. I'm smart enough and intellectually honest enough to know that I understand the idea of a reboot and reset, but this universe, at the same time, it didn't really feel like that. I feel like I would have just preferred this movie to stand on its own and have its own footing, instead of trying to, like, halfway be a Christopher Reeve Superman story and halfway being a reboot reset. That being said, this Superman, like I said earlier, has so much heart and soul that it's definitely one of my favorite versions of this character outside of the animated movies. This movie does such a good job of showcasing the heart and soul of Superman, along with his powers and what he stands for. If it wasn't for this movie being a reboot and the third act of this movie being extremely boring, I would rate this movie a lot higher. I know it's a good, but in good conscience, I cannot put this movie over anything but 7.5 out of 10. This movie's a fun watch, I really enjoyed it, but it's not great, unfortunately. Alright, let's talk about it. I've been putting off watching The Man of Steel for almost a decade now. When the movie first came out when I was a little kid, I don't remember anything about it. Same way when I watched Spider-Man for the first time on the big screen, I saw Spider-Man, I started clapping just because I was like, oh, that's Spider-Man from The Thing. I know Spider-Man. It was the same way as a kid. I was like, oh, I see Man of Steel. That's the Superman from the TV show. Like, I liked it when the movie came out, but I knew growing up, especially like with the Snyderverse and everything, which I wasn't really tapped into as it was coming out, that a lot of people really, really liked this version of Superman, and a lot of people really, really did not like this version of Superman. So it was really interesting to watch this movie for the first time, and I feel like I found myself in the middle between those. Not to be a grifter, but genuinely, there's a lot of things with this movie that I liked. There's also a lot of stuff with this movie that I did not like, so let's just get into it. The plot of this movie, it's a brand new take on Superman. It's a brand new universe, a brand new reset. It's a start to the DC Extended Universe. It starts with the birth of Superman, and again, we spend 30 minutes on Krypton. I could just be a Krypton hater, but I don't care. We don't need to watch Clark Kent's dad fly around on a dinosaur in Krypton. We don't need to watch all the politics and everything. All you need to know is that, like, Krypton's gonna blow up. Good to know that Superman's now going to Earth. Like, that's all we need to know. I don't know why we spend 30 minutes with both Superman origins doing this. But once we get down to Earth, Superman is in his, like, 20s or whatever. He's a full adult with Henry Cavill, and he's spending all of his time to not showcase his powers. He's saving people, which is something they say that this version of Superman doesn't do. He saves people, but he almost does it, like, reluctantly, and is doing everything he can not to be a superhero. He even, like, this, I feel like Clark is so incredibly inconsistent in this movie compared to previous iterations. Clark Kent, like, for example, he steals clothes at the very beginning of the movie, and that's just not who Superman, that's not who Clark Kent is. Clark Kent would go up to the front door of those people and, like, kindly ask if he can take their clothes because he's naked and doesn't have any. Like, that's just not who Superman is. And I don't know if that's because Zack Snyder doesn't understand who Superman is, or he doesn't understand that Superman is supposed to be, like, consistent, at least to some degree, for his character, even though there's director's new takes. I'm not the first one to say this, I won't be the last one to say this, but if you change a character to fit a storyline and a narrative, I think that's fine, but you still should try to be as consistent as you can to the original adaptation of the character. But if you have to change things for the specific storyline, that makes sense, and I'm okay with it as long as it works. It feels like Zack Snyder wanted to make an alien apocalyptic movie, but then got the rights to Superman, because this version of Superman is so brooding and stoic and is like godlike. He doesn't feel like a boy from Kansas. He feels like a Martian manhunter coming down to Earth, trying to act like a human, even though he was raised on Earth since a little boy, if that makes any sort of sense. But we've all seen this movie. We know what happens. Superman ends up fighting Zod once Zod comes back to Earth, and it's kind of like Superman 2, where Zod just wants to take over the Earth. He wants to kill Superman because he's the only thing standing in his way from like terraforming the Earth into Krypton. And that's the entire plot of the movie. The US government doesn't trust Superman, rightfully so. No one likes Superman, and Zod wants to kill him. Superman ends up killing Zod at the end of the movie. In this scene, I'm not the first person to talk about this, but like it's been memed to death. But I don't get it. If you're strong enough to snap his neck, why can you not just move Zod away? Because Zod's trying to kill this family, and Superman reluctantly kills him. Now, I made a video recently going over like the moral implications of superheroes on if they should have a kill roll or if they should not. And I feel like for Superman, if you have to kill, you have to kill. But there's no reason he had to kill. And I was talking to one of my good friends about this once I rewatched the movie, and he was saying like, yeah, he was put in this scenario. And I get it. But why did we write Superman in this scenario to begin with? I feel like if you're going to take someone like Batman, which happens in Batman vs. Superman later on, that I'll talk about next, if we're going to take someone like Batman and put him in a scenario where he has to shoot guns and like it's a darker version where he's going to do that, like that's not who Batman is. So why are we going to write him to do that? This isn't who Superman is, so why are we forcing Superman to kill Zod? Yes, I understand if it's between killing Zod or letting this innocent family die, you kill the villain. But why are we putting Superman in this scenario to begin with rather than putting him in any other superhero scenario other than the fact that we want to make this version of Superman like dark and stoic and different? To me at least, I did not like this movie because there's so many things that just felt incredibly inconsistent with Superman and Clark Kent as a whole. And I feel like that's, for the most part, that's why this generation has such a skewed idea of who Superman is. He's either a Homelander who has all-powerful, all-knowing, like, God or whatever, or he's a Boy Scout that doesn't do anything and is the most boring person ever, when in the reality, Superman is neither of those things. I know I've been talking pretty negative about this movie so far, but there was a lot in this movie that I really liked and a lot in this movie that I really didn't like. The best part of this movie is the action. You can tell that whether it's Superman learning to fly for the first time or Superman throwing a punch at General Zod or whatever might be happening, dragging people through buildings or throwing tanks at one another, the overall weight and strength can be shown of these characters so brilliantly throughout this movie. Zack Snyder, credit where credit due, does such a great job, in my opinion, of showcasing how powerful these entities and these characters are, and they're cutting through this world on Earth like butter, and it is so fun to watch. The sound design is phenomenal, the music, the tone, the score, all of this is brilliant, except unfortunately it happens to take place in this movie that does not get Superman at all. I think the best scene in this movie is Superman fighting General Zod in the small town in Kansas, showing such strength between the characters on both ends. It really shows the level of destruction that Superman can cause, and that hasn't really been seen in the other previous movies. And so when you finally see this version of Superman face off against Zod at the end, he is just destroying Metropolis. And it's like these two gods, like an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, just going back and forth and destroying every single thing in its way. Not to be moist critical, but I have to talk about the Pa Kent situation because it's been talked about to death, but it is something that I could not wrap my head around while watching this movie for the first time. So if you haven't seen this movie or haven't heard other people talk about it, Pa Kent, Clark Kent's like father in this movie from Earth, his Earth father. His whole point is that he doesn't want Superman to use his powers because he knows once Superman does, that the governments of the world and everything's going to change once he uses his powers. And he gets pissed off at Clark and tells him that he would have rathered a school bus full of children die than Clark use his powers to save them. Pa Kent is so dedicated to this cause that he chooses to sacrifice himself in a tornado than have Superman save him. Like, I get, like, the Uncle Ben moment of, like, oh, we had a fight and then he died, and so emotions and everything. But, like, if Superman's gonna reveal himself 5 years down the road, why not just have him reveal himself now and save your life? I don't get this, like, super hyper fixation of, like, Superman, you can't reveal your powers because when you do, people are gonna come after you, even though I know you're gonna reveal your powers down the road. That it feels like you're just prolonging the inevitable when you can save people in real time. It just makes no sense to me why Pa Kent wouldn't want Superman to do the right thing and save people. And it's showcased later on in the story when Superman acts like how Superman normally doesn't act. The bar scene is so stupid where Superman, trying to be a good guy, stops this guy from being, like, abusive and, like, hitting on this girl when she keeps saying no. And so what Superman does in return to get back at this guy, he doesn't beat him up or anything, but he full, like, Homelander Brightburn styles takes this guy's semi-truck and just throws telephone poles and trees through it. And to me, at least, that is so inconsistent of who Superman is. Like, Superman's not an eye for an eye type of character. Superman's not a Boy Scout by any stretch of the imagination, but it just feels like the writing behind this movie doesn't get who Superman and Clark Kent is supposed to be. I don't know, this movie invoked a lot of emotions in me that I wasn't aware a movie could. I am so passionate about Superman being written correctly because he is a beautiful character, but when he's written as, like, a stoic, omnipotent god that just knows everything and can do no wrong, but also has no human emotions, but at the same time is trying to portray to humans that he's one of them, it just makes no sense, and I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of this, like, dark Zack Snyder universe. I get the aesthetic, I get why people like this and fell in love with it, but having Superman in a dark and shiny navy suit, and then having him have, like, no human emotion, only at the end when he decides to kill the big bad of the movie, that to me at least doesn't sit right, and that doesn't feel like who Superman is. I've heard a lot of complaints about this movie online throughout the years, and one of the biggest things I've heard is, like, if you turn your brain off and just enjoy the movie for what it is, it's a fun movie. I don't disagree with that sentence. I found myself throughout this movie enjoying parts of it. I enjoyed the action set pieces and the explosions and the pretty colors and everything. That part I think was awesome. But if you have to justify a movie by saying, hey, turn your brain off and don't think and you'll enjoy it, I think that's where you have a problem. I think a movie where you can say that is like Over the Hedge. Like, just turn your brain off and watch the slop, even though Over the Hedge is peak. But for a Superman movie, a character who's like the superhero of all time, with so much backstory, he's such a beautifully written character that has heart and soul to look after everyone, no matter who you are, and you say, oh, you have to turn your brain off to watch this movie. I think that's beyond stupid. Zack Snyder does do a good job of expressing the weight of actions and consequences in an intense fight scene with this character, but this feels like Zack Snyder would have crushed it if he wrote a Homelander or a Brightburn movie. Not Superman. Zack Snyder just doesn't understand what Superman is and what he represents. He understands action and things that look pretty and make people ooh and ah, but he doesn't understand the heart of Superman. Once again, I get why Superman kills Zod at the end of the movie. That's like the main thing people talk about with this. My main issue isn't that he killed Zod. It's that the writers wrote him in and shoehorned him into a corner to where he had to kill him. I get why he didn't, but he never should have. So why make him? It's so stupid. It felt extremely lazy, and it felt like we had to make this so that we can solidify him in this new version of the character in this new universe, that it's going to be edgy and different because we're in the 2000s now, or we're in the 2010s. Things are edgy. Screw Christopher Reeve, screw Hope, screw all this campiness. We're in the dark DC universe now. It was just, I hated it. It was so awful. Oh, also, I didn't say this earlier, but Amy Adams is just a terrible actress to represent Lois Lane. I could not see it the entire movie. Overall, I really enjoyed the visuals of this movie. I can't even lie. lie. I thought the sound design and the music and the score were pretty high parts of the film for me. The intense showcasing of the power and destruction was unlike anything I've ever seen before. Zack Snyder does a very, very good job of showcasing how powerful these characters are and how powerful they can be. There's still parts of this movie that I do not like. I obviously hate the dark Superman and the stoic part of him. I'm not a huge fan of the costume of Superman. It feels so like classless and careless. The final act of this movie, you're just nuking this city to have action pieces for no reason. The only good parts of this movie are the action bits, and after like an hour of that, I kind of just got bored and it was repetitive. After seeing so much destruction, everything eventually just feels weightless. Overall, I'm gonna give this movie a 5 out of 10. This movie's not as bad as people make it out to be, but it's definitely not one that should be glazed. It's the more entertaining of all of the Superman movies, but as far as quality for representing the character, there's not really much behind this. Now finally, the moment that no one has been waiting for, Batman versus Superman. I watched this movie, I think, at a friend's house for the first time when it came out, and the moment I saw Batman pull out a gun, I stopped watching. This movie has been memed to death, has been ripped apart. There's obviously like the Snyder cultists, and then there's the people that know what the characters represent and who they're supposed to be, and that want nothing to do with this. I was expecting to find myself being a grifter and being in the middle of those two, and I did not like this movie, but I wanted to go ahead and give this version of the universe the benefit of the doubt. So I unfortunately watched the 3-hour-long version of this movie, and man, when I say I didn't have fun, I did not have fun. The movie starts with an opening scene of Bruce Wayne's parents getting killed in slow motion, and right from the get-go you get to see that this is a darker version of Superman and Batman, and it's just everything you would expect it to be. I hated it. One thing I liked from the very beginning, though, was the choice to show Batman in the same final battle of Metropolis from the Man of Steel. Putting Batman on the ground in the action, saving children and citizens during this event, is something that is actually really beautiful, I think. Superman is causing all this destruction, and then meanwhile you have Batman, the man with no power, sitting and watching this random stoic alien that no one likes destroy and kill so many people that it immediately puts me in the audience on Batman's side. Cut 18 months later, and we see Lois being held at gunpoint by a Taliban leader as she's trying to write an article on these guys. So then Superman shows up and he just murders this guy. He rams him through a concrete pillar and just looks so evil and menacing. And it was at this point where I knew I was not gonna like this movie, because Zack Snyder's, like, his Man of Steel, I gave it a 5 out of 10. It was okay, but I had really high hope that, like, he was gonna be, you know, like, redeemed in this movie, and then the first thing we see of Superman in this movie, besides the flashback, is him killing someone. Like, it is just so apparent that this is not Superman. This is an alien pretending to be Superman. This is awful. Why is Superman killing? We then cut to the most insufferable, but also the best part of this movie, which is Zuckerberg, Lex Luthor, Jesse Eisenberg, and he's like the worst part of this movie, but at the same time is the best part of this movie. He's like a schizophrenic Mark Zuckerberg-esque person, and he is all over the place, but at the same time, like, is doing a great job. I don't know how I feel about this version of Lex Luthor. He crushes it for what he was, like, supposed to do. Jesse Eisenberg killed this role, but I'm not a huge fan of just the way that this Lex Luthor is supposed to be. Speedrunning the plot line, Lex Luthor basically wants to get kryptonite to kill Superman. Duh. Lex Luthor always does that. And so he somehow gets access to Zod's body through, like, the Department of Defense by agreeing to help him out on this project, but then the senators end up blocking Lex from importing any more kryptonite to work on their project. So Lex Luthor ends up getting pissed off because he needs his evil plan to work so he can kill Superman. So he calls Superman the devil and invites Bruce Banner to his event that he's hosting at his house. We see the two characters of Superman and Batman interact for the first time at this house party, and Bruce is literally like, I'm just gonna break into Lex Luthor's house to get access to his archives, because I know he's trying to kill Superman, so I need to know what he knows so I can kill Superman. And you would think the two of them would team up to kill Superman, but instead Lex's whole plot is that he's gonna pin Batman against Superman so we can have the Batman versus Superman movie fight scene. One of the main points of this movie is coined as like the Superman question, and it is Zack Snyder comparing Superman to Jesus. This movie, and I'm a Christian, so you would think that I would enjoy this like undertone of religion and philosophy and everything. I thought it was so stupid. Zack Snyder, throughout this whole film and all of his like DC movies that I've seen so far, is obsessed with this idea of comparing Superman to Jesus. Yeah, Jesus is God in human flesh and Superman has powers like a god, but it's just so stupid. The Superman question shows the contrast of opinions and ideologies about treating Superman like a messiah figure or like a human or like an alien, and it's just so stupid. And the reason that this movie is obsessed about that is purely to show that Batman is a human, Superman is not a human, so Superman bad. One of the most memed on parts of this movie is the court scene where they're discussing or not what to do with Superman, and Superman comes into the court, or like this Senate hearing or whatever, and there's a dude in a wheelchair that Lex Luthor decided to just like hide a bunch of bombs in. He absolutely nukes like the Senate hearing or wherever they're at, and Superman the entire time, you know, faster than a speeding bullet, can reverse time, just stands there and closes his eyes and just feels sad while this whole courtroom just gets eviscerated by this bomb. I don't care that it's later revealed that this like bomb was encased in lead so Superman couldn't see it. Superman is Superman. He could have saved this crowd of people. I get why they wrote it like he didn't or whatever to pin Batman against Superman, but I think this just ultimately comes down to how Superman and how the writing behind this movie was written. Why are we putting Superman in this scenario where he can't stop a bomb from blowing up? I mean, The Flash, there's a whole episode to The Flash TV show of Barry Allen being stuck in like flash time while trying to figure out how to deactivate a nuke that is currently going off. He's trying to figure out how to stop it. I get that Superman is slower than The Flash, but Superman is Superman. He could have stopped this bomb, and I get why they didn't do it, but it ultimately just boils down to the misrepresentation of Superman in this like Snyder cult universe. And I just hate it. This video is already getting incredibly long, and I could talk for probably about another hour about how much I don't like Batman using guns and Batman killing people. This, again, with Superman being a stoic messiah-esque figure, boils down to Zack Snyder not understanding who these characters are and what their core values are. Even in the absolute Batman universe that is going on currently in the comics, it's a new take on Batman that is wildly different than any other interpretation of the character. Yet it stays true to the core tenets of Batman. If you want to change things about Batman for a new narrative and a new story, that's totally fine. But what makes Batman Batman is his core ideologies and principles, and one of those, like the main thing, is that Batman does not use guns. I don't want to hear that this is a new universe and it's a brooding, like, seasoned veteran Batman. I don't care. Bruce would rather die than use a gun, and that's who he is. So having all throughout this movie, this version of Batman that just straight up murders people and brands people on their chest so that he doesn't kill them, but when they get sent to jail, the people in jail see the branding and know that they gotta murder him. Like, that's just killing with extra steps, Bruce. It's the exact same thing. So I don't get why this version of Batman, or I'll get to the Martha down the road in a second, but off topic, I don't get why this version of Batman has no problem with killing. And then the moment he says, Martha, Martha, he stops and is like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Like, dude, you've been murdering people or sending people to on their deathbed to get murdered. And then the moment this dude says your mom's name, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. I should stop. It's so stupid. Like I said earlier, I could pick apart every single scene in this movie that I don't like, talk about the things for Superman that I don't like, the things for Batman, the things for Lex Luthor. Like, I could spend so much time talking about this movie, but I'm not going to do that, quite frankly, just because I don't want to, and I don't want to be here forever. But one of the things that I really wanted to point out is people say that Superman, like, he's a good guy, he was reluctant to fight Batman. Superman proceeds to try to fight Batman the entire time in their interaction when he's got like his Iron Man suit on by not talking to him. Superman says to Batman like, hey, Lex is trying to get you to kill me, he's got my mom, and then Batman the entire time is just dumping into him with weapons. And then Superman finally gets annoyed and starts attacking Batman. In my opinion, if I'm Superman and I've got this like evil schizophrenic Reddit Tumblr Joker impression like character of Lex Luthor who's kidnapped my mom and almost just killed my girlfriend, and he says, hey, you gotta go kill Batman and then I'll set your mom free. I'm going up to Batman and I'm saying like, hey, we gotta take this guy down. What should we do? And even if Batman, because I'm Superman, is shooting at me and trying to do all these things, I need this guy's help. So I'm going to stand still and say, Bruce, help me. And I'm not a threat. Meanwhile, what happens in the movie is like the third time Superman gets shot, not with kryptonite or anything. He's like, all right, fine, let me just kill you then. And they fight. It's so stupid. It makes no sense. other than the fact of you have to turn your brain off and watch our two action figures go like this and fight each other so we can have like our happy fun time in seats. It just makes no sense. It's so incredibly inconsistent with each version of these characters for what they're supposed to be. I don't care that this is a dark Zack Snyder gritty like brooding universe. I just absolutely hate it. And then to make things worse is the Martha scene where Superman is about to just get pierced in the heart by a kryptonite spear, and he says, "Martha, Martha," and so Batman doesn't kill Superman because Martha reminds him of his dead mom, and then he remembers his no-kill rule. Whatever, I understand that, but the very next scene is Batman breaking into a warehouse and murdering 24 people. Literally, the next scene is Batman murdering people. It's just so stupid. The chase scene of him in his Batmobile, he's murdering people. Why would you have any problem of not murdering Superman, especially after the whole movie you gearing up to kill him? And oh, his mom's the same name as your mom. You kill people all the time. Just finish your job and kill Superman. It's so inconsistent. It's so stupid. It makes no sense, even for this version of the character. And then the last thing, don't get me started. After the big final battle of Superman and Batman fighting, they go to take down Lex Luthor, they introduce Doomsday, and I watched the 3-hour version, so I got a whole hour of the pseudo Justice League with Wonder Woman coming in fighting Doomsday, and it was so stupid. They said 14,000 times that there's no one in Metropolis or Gotham. They've all been evacuated, so Zack Snyder can do his Man of Steel thing and eviscerate all the buildings and have maximum destruction and chaos without anyone online saying that Superman didn't save all the casualties. It's so stupid. This movie was made for people that don't understand the character and like action, which, hey, if you like that, that's fine. But I'm here to watch representations of Superman, not just a stoic god who wants to pretend to be a human. Also, throughout this entire Doomsday fight, dude, we hear the Wonder Woman theme. Chill out. Why are we blasting it every time we see Wonder Woman? At the beginning of the movie, we see that Batman, all he wants to do is save lives. He does every single thing he can to stop Superman from killing, and it's related to all of those people that he obviously sees at the beginning of the movie. Batman values the lives of the people that Superman indirectly killed during the Man of Steel finale. But then you see this version of Batman who doesn't value life. He is constantly killing people. Yeah, even if they're bad guys, who cares though? They're constantly dying, and that's not what Batman is. The tonal whiplash of back and forth is just insane. Superman in this movie is very stoic, like I've said 1,000 times, almost to the point of him being lifeless up until his mom gets involved. There's a lot I could say about this movie, but genuinely, I was just not a fan. The action is really cool, the sound design is awesome, the visuals are really interesting. Zack Snyder obviously has an aesthetic for this universe, but the story does not do it for me. I don't necessarily buy at all that Superman would be involved in fighting Batman in this universe. Batman wanting to kill Superman because he deemed him as an alien and a threat for the human race. It makes sense, but it's not consistent with the adaptation of Batman that we see. I in no way ever see this version of Superman, or any version of Superman, getting this involved in trying to kill Batman, even if he does have his mother held hostage. Throughout this story, Superman is so consistent of wanting to take down Batman, because Batman's thing is that he puts fear into criminals. Hey Superman, you're putting fear into the world. Why do you care about this one-off Bat vigilante in a separate town when you're doing the same thing on a global national scale? I watched the 3-hour-long version of this, and the last hour, I genuinely almost fell asleep. I hated the rushed third act battle. Overall, I was just not a fan. Superman feels like someone who didn't know who Superman was trying to act like Superman based on what people told him that Superman acts like. This version of Superman is so dull and not interesting, and it does not have the heart that I need my Superman to have. It's so upsetting because Henry Cavill is the perfect actor to represent Superman. He's handcrafted from God. He is what Superman looks like in the comic books, ripped out into live action, but it's such a tragedy that his version of Superman was written worse than any other Superman I've ever seen. Rating this movie on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm giving it a 2 out of 10 on my scale. This movie was horrible. It's like an edgelord movie come to life with Batman being a grifter and an edgy Superman, while Lex Luthor is high on cocaine trying to do everything he can to impersonate Mark Zuckerberg and the Joker at the same time. I just did not enjoy this movie whatsoever. If you're a Zack Snyder truther, let me know down in the comments why this movie's handpicked from God and it's one of the best movies out there, but I'm just not a fan of the Snyderverse. I think it looks cool, and it's an interesting take on these characters that are absolutely abysmal, not representing what they're supposed to be. Like, whatever, that's your thing, but for me at least, I'm not listening to Skrillex all day long. Like, that's not my cup of tea, so I'm not a fan at all. Time for Superman 2025, and I just gotta say, I really enjoyed this movie. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Is it terrible? No. It deserves all the hype that it's getting, in my opinion. It's 11:45 at night right now, and I'm trying not to rush this video, but I really wanted to get this video out because I have a lot to say about this movie. You can tell right away from the creative team behind this, whether it be from the marketing or even the script, the people behind this project care about Superman, and I think they absolutely nail it. They get Superman done correctly on this movie, and honestly, after watching every single Superman movie ever, I think this is one of the very few movies besides Superman 2 that really nail down who Superman is. Whether it be Clark saving an innocent civilian or be Clark trying to take down a kaiju monster, he is constantly trying to make sure he's doing everything he can to not kill someone or to not harm someone, and that can't be said about every single Superman on this list. So I know I said this movie isn't perfect, so I really want to touch very quickly on the parts of this movie that I did not enjoy. Number one, the camera shot that's been memed to death of the close-up of Superman's face while he's flying, that's all throughout this movie, and I know it's me nitpicking, but I did not enjoy it at all. Whether it be a close-up of Superman flying or just a close-up of Lex Luthor talking, every single character in this movie, there's a single shot of them getting this weird, like, sideways close-up, and it was so distracting for me and my friend when we went to watch this movie tonight. Another thing that I really didn't enjoy about this movie is the pacing is not where it should be. This movie feels really rushed and really fast. It's only a little over 2 hours long, which I think this movie in this universe needed more time to flesh out the world building and the overall narrative, but this movie felt very rushed, and I don't think there was a reason for that. There's no reason to get to the end of this story as soon as possible. We're establishing this version of Superman, and we're establishing this universe, so let's go ahead and just take our time. One of the last few negatives I wanted to touch on is the first third of this movie is not that good, in my opinion. I might be the only one out there, but it felt like this movie at the beginning was very MCU-ified, and I mean that genuinely in the worst way possible. The color saturation was turned all the way up, which can sometimes be a good thing, but it seemed like the first third of this movie was very campy, but to a fault almost. Like, it wasn't taking itself too seriously, and yeah, we're reintroducing the wheel here with Superman, but I didn't find myself getting invested as early on as I thought I would be with this story until what I consider to be one of the best scenes in the movie, and that's the Lois and Superman interview scene. I was so hyped for this movie, and don't get me wrong, I think this was a great movie, but it felt really sluggish and at the same time too fast for the first third of the movie. I might be the only one feeling this, but I was just not able to get myself like bought into this universe until we started seeing the Lois and Clark dynamic. Touching on them because they're a huge focal point of this movie, Lois and Clark, their chemistry from the very beginning is off the walls and is ecstatic. I can totally buy that Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane, and Clark Kent are this little trio that work at the Daily Planet. I mean, the three of them have more chemistry as a trio than the whole sequel Star Wars cast combined, and that's not really saying a whole lot, but you get what I mean. Going back to the interview scene I mentioned previously, I think this is one of the best scenes in the movie because it shows how independent both of these characters are. Superman thinking that Lois is just going to interview him as a happy-go-lucky interview with his girlfriend when he's just Superman. It also shows the fact that Superman doesn't really do a whole lot of thinking to his actions because that's a good thing. The only thinking that he's doing is trying to save lives. While Lois, we watch her character unravel as she's doing everything she can to ask those hard-hitting questions because this might be the only opportunity she has to get an actual interview with Superman. She doesn't care the fact that this is Clark Kent, her boyfriend. This is Superman. This is going to be the interview of a lifetime, and she's throwing all the hard questions at him, and this on and off again, back and forth dynamic they have in the scene, I could glaze it for hours. I think it is so brilliantly written and showcases exactly who these two characters are, moving them forward and propelling them in this next DC universe. I think Lois and Clark are home runs and have absolutely crushed it in their roles. Nicholas Hoult is also crushing it in this role as Lex Luthor. I totally buy that he's this evil billionaire who literally is just racist towards aliens, and wants to get rid of Superman. Part of the plotline with Lex Luthor as well is he's trying to work with the US government so he can secretly take over this other country in the Middle East, which this movie is absolutely filled with political undertones, so I'll get to that in a second. But Lex Luthor is basically Mysterio by the way that he works and manipulates Ultraman at his will with his drones. I think this version of Lex Luthor is by far the best version that we have seen on the big screen, and it's not even close. This Lex Luthor is evil and conniving and cares literally about no one besides himself and besides taking down Superman. He's obviously very wealthy. He has all the technology. He's done every single thing he can to propel himself and put him in the scenario to take down Superman. He's done his homework, and it absolutely shows. One thing that I think that they're hinting at with Lex Luthor while controlling Ultraman is they're gearing up to that narrative of Lex Luthor wearing the mech suit, and I cannot wait to see that in live action. Besides those three characters, some standouts for me were the action in this movie. It's pretty few and far between in my opinion, but besides the lake scene that looks like that Pixels movie, I think this movie had really good action. And I was talking to my friend Ethan after watching this movie, and they really depower Superman for a good majority of this movie. And before the Snyder cultists come in, I think that's a good thing, because the large majority of fans out there that aren't diehard Superman fans, they look at Superman as this Boy Scout godlike figure that has no weaknesses, when that's just not who Superman is. So I think the creative decision to have Superman constantly be pegged down in this movie, whether it be through nanotechs infiltrating his lungs so he can't breathe, or kryptonite, or just pairing him up against someone exactly like him, literally his clone, I think is a brilliant decision. It showcases that Superman has heart and soul and is willing to fight against insurmountable odds no matter what the circumstance is, without it being boring. That's my main critique, well, not my main, but one of my main critiques of Man of Steel is that he's just fighting someone that has the exact same powers as him. And yeah, he was depowered or whatever at one point due to the atmosphere, but this movie, there's constantly different action set pieces, and Superman being depowered through the majority of the film, I feel like is a really good thing. I don't need my Superman to be someone that is the most powerful person in the universe and is taking down monsters left and right. Superman is an alien, yes, and he is one of the most powerful creatures in the universe, but what I care about is the narrative that we see behind the heart and soul of Clark Kent, and that's exactly what we get in this movie, and we get some really interesting action as well. Going back to the heart and soul of Clark Kent, this movie, that is the main focal point. Spoiler alert for one of the only spoilers in this entire review, we find out that Clark Kent, when he was sent to Earth by his parents, he wasn't sent to be a savior, to be a godlike figure. He was actually sent, and his parents told him that they want him to rule Earth and to be a king and quite literally take all these wives and have people bowing down to him, and that's obviously not who Superman is. So the whole undertone of this movie is creating your own destiny and being who you want to be, not being who you're told to be. That combined with the immigration story, and yeah, Fox News called Superman super woke. Superman is an immigrant. That's always who he's been. So people getting mad at this movie saying, oh my gosh, Superman's going woke or blah, blah, blah. This movie is, if you think this movie's apolitical, you're just stupid. That's point blank, it's simple. Superman is a story about an immigrant who comes to America and is doing every single thing he can to create a better tomorrow for everybody. And the people that choose to not watch this movie, or the people that think this movie has gone woke just because they've kind of changed his origin or he's going against the government, you're just stupid, and I'm not apologizing for it. This movie is really good, but it's obviously not without its faults, and I've touched on that earlier. So to wrap this review and this whole video up, I'm going to give Superman a really solid 8 out of 10. I think this movie was rushed. I think there's parts of this movie that weren't really fleshed out and cooked all the way that they should have been. Some of the side characters, like Hot Girl, really didn't need to be in this movie. I think overall, this is a really solid movie to help launch off the new DC universe, which I am very excited for. I think all the side characters that were introduced had their place in the story, but overall it felt a little cram-packed, it felt a little rushed, it felt like there were parts of this movie that didn't really need to be included and parts of this movie that should have been fleshed out more. But I am really, really excited to see this version of Superman moving forward, and I think this movie was a home run and is going to set the DC universe up in a great place moving forward. This is by far my favorite version of Superman, not that we've had a whole lot of competition in the past, so again, I'm giving this a very, very solid 8 out of 10. And I'll say this one more time, Snyder fans, you guys need to move on. David Cornsweat is our Superman, and he's here to stay, and I'm excited to see where he goes later on in this universe. If you made it this far into the video, genuinely, this is like probably the longest video I've ever edited and worked on, so I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I really enjoyed this type of video, and I'm hopefully going to be able to pump out the same exact thing, but for the Fantastic Four, before Fantastic Four First Steps releases, so be on the lookout for that. But genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys so much for watching. We're almost at the time of recording at 3,000 followers, so if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It just helps the channel grow, helps me know that you guys like making the videos, and I'll keep making more because of them. So like I said earlier, thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. It means so much more than you guys already know. If you thought any of these reviews were just awful and I was way off in left field, feel free to let me know. But after literally marathoning all of these movies day after day, I kind of got burnt out. But also with Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman, I do feel pretty strongly that these are terrible representations of the character. But at the end of the day, I'm just a guy on the internet, and I had fun watching these movies, so I hope you had fun watching this video. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.
If you think I'll just go to jail and rot, you're living in a dream world!
Good. Dreams save us. Dreams lift us up and transform us into something better. And on my soul, I swear that until my dream of a world where dignity, honor, and justice are the reality we all share, I'll never stop fighting. Ever.
Who are you?
A friend.
Bye.